The birthday party was going exactly as I'd expected. Which is to say, terribly. Grandpa Frank's 80th birthday celebration at the Riverside Country Club was supposed to be a joyous family gathering, but like most Martinez family events, it had devolved into a showcase for everyone's achievements except mine. My cousin Elena was regaling the table with stories about her promotion to senior partner at her law firm. My brother Carlos was showing off photos of his new vacation home in Aspen. My sister Isabella was discussing her upcoming gallery opening where her paintings would be featured alongside real artists, as she put it. Me. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, picking at my salmon and trying to become invisible. It wasn't working. So Mia, Uncle Roberto said with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate, "Are you still doing that computer thing?" "I work in tech, yes." "Still trying to make those little apps?" Aunt Carmen laughed. "How adorable. When are you going to get a real job like your siblings?" I glanced at Grandpa Frank, the only person at this table who had ever shown genuine interest in my work. He winked at me and mouthed, "Ignore them," but even his support couldn't shield me from what was coming. Dad cleared his throat, preparing for what I recognized as one of his speeches. "Since we're all here celebrating family, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." "Oh no. Mia," he continued, his voice carrying across the private dining room we'd reserved, "you're 32 years old. You're poor and embarrassing our family with this startup nonsense. It's time to stop playing games and get a real job." The room fell silent except for the gentle murmur of conversations from other tables. Every family member was staring at me, waiting for my response to Dad's public humiliation. "Dad, please. It's Grandpa's birthday. Can we not do this here? When else are we going to do it? You avoid family gatherings, you never return our calls, and when you do show up, you sit there like a sullen teenager." His voice was rising now, attracting attention from nearby tables. "Look at your siblings. Look at your cousins. They have careers, houses, respect in the community. What do you have?" I looked around the table at my successful family members, all of whom were nodding in agreement with Dad's assessment. They saw a woman in a simple black dress, driving a 5-year-old Honda Civic, living in what they assumed was a tiny apartment because I'd never invited them over. They had no idea that the computer thing I'd been working on for the past 4 years was actually Quantum Solutions, an artificial intelligence and data analytics company that I'd built from nothing into one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the country. They had no idea that my little apps were actually enterprise software solutions being used by Fortune 500 companies to revolutionize their operations. They had no idea that their poor and embarrassing family member was worth $1.3 billion and climbing. "Answer me, Mia," Dad demanded. "What do you have to show for your life?" I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, the large-screen TV mounted on the dining room wall suddenly switched from the sports highlights that had been playing softly in the background to a breaking news alert. "We interrupt this program for breaking news," the anchor announced, her voice cutting through our family drama. "Forbes magazine has just released its annual billionaire list, and for the first time, a local tech entrepreneur has made the exclusive ranking." Every head in the room turned toward the TV screen, including my family's. The anchor continued speaking, but I could barely hear her over the sound of my heart pounding. 29-year-old Mia Martinez, founder and CEO of Quantum Solutions, has been named to the Forbes billionaire list with an estimated net worth of $1.3 billion, making her the youngest self-made female billionaire in the tech sector. The photo that appeared on screen was my official corporate headshot. Me in a navy business suit, looking confident and professional. Nothing like the simple black dress I was wearing tonight, but unmistakably me. The silence in our private dining room was absolute. The AI and data analytics company, which Martinez founded in her college dorm room just 4 years ago, has revolutionized how major corporations analyze and utilize their data streams, the anchor continued. Quantum Solutions' proprietary algorithms are now used by over 200 Fortune 500 companies, generating annual revenues exceeding $400 million. I watched my family's faces as they processed this information. Dad's mouth was hanging open. Mom looked like she might faint. Carlos was staring at the TV screen as if it might be showing a different Mia Martinez. Martinez, who graduated summa cum laude from MIT with degrees in computer science and mathematics, reportedly turned down acquisition offers exceeding $800 million last year, choosing instead to take her company public in what became the most successful tech IPO of the decade. The camera cut to footage of me ringing the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange 6 months ago. I remembered that day vividly. It had been the culmination of everything I'd worked for since college. "Holy shit," Elena whispered, then immediately covered her mouth and looked apologetically at Grandpa Frank. The news segment continued with commentary from tech industry analysts discussing Quantum Solutions' market impact and my company's projected growth. They showed the headquarters building we'd purchased in downtown Austin, my face on the cover of several business magazines, and clips from interviews I'd given to major media outlets. Interviews my family had apparently never seen, despite my success being covered extensively in both local and national media. Finally, the anchor concluded, Martinez was unavailable for comment today, but in a recent interview with Fortune magazine, she credited her success to the power of believing in your vision even when others don't understand it. The full Forbes billionaire list will be published Monday morning. The TV returned to its regular programming, leaving my family in stunned silence. "That's..." Isabella's voice came out as a croak. "That's really you. It's really me. But you said you worked in tech. You never said you owned a billion-dollar company." Mom's voice was shrill with confusion and what sounded like panic. "You never asked for details. You all just assumed I was failing because that fit your narrative about my choices." Dad was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "Mia, this is impossible. If you're really worth billion. With AB, Carlos said faintly. "If that's true, then why do you live like you're broke? Why drive that old car? Why dress like..." He gestured vaguely at my outfit. "Like what, Dad?" "Like someone who doesn't need to prove her worth through material possessions." Uncle Roberto found his voice first. "Mia, sweetheart, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us about your success? When would I have told you? During the family dinners where you all take turns bragging about your achievements while treating me like the family disappointment? During the phone calls where you offer unsolicited advice about how I should be more realistic about my career?" Aunt Carmen looked embarrassed. "We were just trying to help." "Help? By constantly telling me I was wasting my time? By assuming I was poor without ever asking about my actual financial situation? By treating me like a charity case who needed your pity?" The questions were coming faster now as my family tried to process this revelation. "How long have you been successful?" Mom asked. "The company went public 18 months ago. We've been profitable for 3 years. I became a millionaire when I was 28. And you never thought to mention this?" Dad's voice was a mixture of hurt and anger. "Dad, 6 months ago at Easter dinner, you literally told me I was living in a fantasy world and needed to wake up and join the real world. Why would I share my success with people who clearly didn't believe I was capable of achieving it?" Grandpa Frank, who had been quiet throughout this entire exchange, suddenly started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a deep, delighted belly laugh that had everyone turning to stare at him. "Grandpa." Isabella looked concerned. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "I'm proud. So incredibly proud of my granddaughter." "You knew?" Mom asked. "Of course I knew. Mia's been telling me about her company for years. I've been following her progress, reading about her success, bragging about her to my friends at the senior center." He turned to me with a huge grin. "I have every article about Quantum Solutions printed out and pinned to my bulletin board." "Why didn't you tell us?" Dad demanded. "Because it wasn't my story to tell. And frankly, I wanted to see how long it would take you all to figure out that you were treating a billionaire like a failure." He shook his head in amazement. "4 years. It took you 4 years of her being wildly successful before you accidentally found out because it was announced on television." The weight of Grandpa's words settled over the table. 4 years of dismissing my work. 4 years of treating me like the family disappointment. 4 years of assuming I was poor and struggling while I was actually building an empire. "Mia," Elena said carefully, "when you said you worked in tech, we thought you meant you had some entry-level job at a startup." "I do work at a startup. I founded it. I run it. I built it from an idea in my dorm room into a company that employs over 1,200 people and generates nearly $500 million in annual revenue." $500 million? Carlos's voice cracked on the words. $437 million last fiscal year, to be precise. The silence returned as they processed this number. I looked around the table at these people who had spent years treating me like their poor relation, offering unsolicited advice about how to live my life. "I have some questions," Isabella said finally. "I'm sure you do. The apartment you live in, is it actually tiny?" "I live in a penthouse downtown. 42nd floor, panoramic city views, about 4,000 square feet." "And your car?" "I have several cars. I drive the Honda because it's reliable and I don't need to impress anyone. I also have a Tesla Model S and a vintage Porsche, but those mostly stay in my garage." Mom looked like she might cry. "Mia, why didn't you correct us when we made assumptions about your life?" "Because I wanted to see if you'd love and support me when you thought I had nothing. I wanted to know if your affection was conditional on my success." "And what did you learn?" Dad asked quietly. "I learned that you're more comfortable with me being a failure than you are with me being successful. I learned that you'd rather offer pity and advice than ask questions and show genuine interest. I learned that your love came with conditions I was tired of trying to meet." The dining room around us had grown quieter as other families finished their meals and left. We were alone now with the weight of 4 years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. "Mia," Uncle Roberto said, "we owe you an apology. A huge apology. You owe me more than an apology. You owe me respect. You owe me the courtesy of asking about my life instead of making assumptions. You owe me the benefit of the doubt when I tell you I'm working on something important." "You're right," Mom said, tears starting to flow. "We've been terrible. We've treated you like you were incapable of success, and we never gave you credit for your intelligence or your vision." Dad was staring at his hands. "I called you poor and embarrassing." "You did. In front of the whole family. You did. While you're actually worth more money than all of us combined. Significantly more, yes." He looked up at me, his face filled with shame and regret. "Mia, I don't know how to apologize for that. I don't know how to make up for years of treating you like you were less than you are. Start by seeing me as I actually am instead of as you think I should be." "And how do we do that?" I considered the question carefully. These people had hurt me, dismissed me, and underestimated me for years. But they were still my family, and part of me still wanted their love and acceptance, if it could be given freely and without conditions. "Ask me about my work. Not to offer advice or express concern, but because you're genuinely interested in what I've built. Ask me about my goals, my challenges, my successes. Treat me like the successful CEO I am instead of like the struggling daughter you think I should be." "We can do that," Isabella said immediately. "We want to do that." "I want to hear about your company," Carlos added. "I want to understand what you've built and how you built it." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "I want to know about the tech industry, about artificial intelligence, about how you identified market opportunities that other people missed." For the next 2 hours, my family peppered me with questions about quantum solutions. Real questions, not the patronizing inquiries I'd grown accustomed to. They wanted to understand my technology, my business model, my growth strategy. They asked about my employees, my corporate culture, my plans for expansion. It was the first time in years that I felt like they were genuinely interested in my life rather than concerned about my choices. "The office building we saw on TV," Mom said, "is that where you work every day?" "Most days, yes. Though I travel frequently for client meetings and investor presentations." "And you really have 1,200 employees?" "As of last month, yes. We're growing by about 50 to 75 people per quarter." Dad shook his head in amazement. "Mia, I'm struggling to understand how we got this so wrong. How did we not know about any of this?" "Because you never asked and I stopped trying to tell you. Every time I mentioned my work, you'd either dismiss it or offer advice about how I should be doing something else. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe than to constantly defend my choices." "But the media coverage," Elena pointed out. "You've been on magazine covers, interviewed on business shows. How did we miss all of that? Did you look for it? Did you Google my name? Did you read tech industry publications? Did you pay attention to business news?" The uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know. "We just assumed," Mom said quietly, "that if you were really successful you would have told us." "I tried to tell you. For years I tried. But every conversation about my work turned into a lecture about being more practical or realistic. Eventually I gave up trying." Grandpa Frank reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry they didn't listen, sweetheart. But I want you to know that I've been proud of you every single day. I know, Grandpa. You're the only one who ever asked about my work without immediately trying to change the subject. Because I could see the passion in your eyes when you talked about it. I could see that you were building something important, even when I didn't understand the technology. Dad cleared his throat. Mia, what happens now? With us, I mean. How do we rebuild our relationship after all of this? I looked around the table at my family, people who had spent years treating me like their poor relation, who had just discovered that their failure daughter was actually more successful than any of them had ever dreamed of being. That depends on you, I said finally. Can you treat me with the respect you'd show any other billionaire CEO? Can you show genuine interest in my life and my work? Can you stop offering unsolicited advice about how I should live my life? Yes, Mom said immediately. Yes, we can do all of that. Can you accept that I don't need your guidance or your concern about my financial future? Yes. Can you see me as a successful businesswoman instead of as your little girl who needs protection from the big, scary world? We can try, Dad said. It might take some adjustment, but we can try. I nodded slowly. Then we can try to rebuild our relationship. But it has to be based on who I actually am, not who you think I should be. Agreed, Isabella said. Completely agreed. The rest of the evening passed more smoothly than any family gathering I could remember. My relatives asked thoughtful questions about my business, shared genuine excitement about my achievements, and treated me like the successful adult I was instead of like the struggling daughter they'd imagined. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside. Mia, I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for tonight, but for years of not seeing who you really were. I appreciate that, Dad. Can I ask you something? Sure. When I said you were poor and embarrassing, how did that feel knowing what you actually have? I thought about it for a moment. It felt like you were describing a stranger. Because the person you were talking about, poor, embarrassing, unsuccessful, that's not who I am. That's who you needed me to be to feel better about yourselves. He winced. That's harsh. But it's true, isn't it? It's easier to be the